Well, welcome back, and hope you enjoyed Chapter 4, International Baccalaureate, a System for Deeper Learning, question mark, which I thought was interesting because I think often International Baccalaureate is assumed to be kind of one of your more premier deeper learning systems. I'll throw that out there as a little hand grenade. Anyhow, Harry, Stephen, I know you actually attended an international baccalaureate school, so why don't you give your thoughts on kind of what your takeaways from this chapter, and you and Harry can duke it out.
Yeah, I mean, it's the conversation continues right around this question of like, what is the role of like a good established system? And it's interesting to have gone through IB. So yeah, I don't know if I said that. So I'm somewhat a product of an IB education. I did it for all my 4 years of high school way back when. And like, I really found a lot of it to be incredibly valuable. And, it kind of was formative for me as far as, and we were just talking about this, the notion of thinking deeply about like, thinking deeply about the kind of like normal disciplines like history and math and all this stuff. And when you go to like an AP test or you go to like a normal test, you're just usually asked for answers, right? Like what's the, fill in the bubble on the AP sheet, right? But in IB, they really are looking for you to explain virtually every step of the way, like throughout all of the, all the different years of going through the IB program. And then on the final exam, even, it's all about showing how you think. So can you think like a historian? Can you think mathematically? Can you justify the way you are getting to your final answers? And so it's, yeah, I think there's a lot there. I think there's a lot that could be valuable about it. As a system, I think it's fascinating to consider. Yeah, I can see your face, Phil. It's fascinating to consider what it would be like for Real World Academy to possibly have, is there a parallel kind of external body out there that could help in the same kind of way and bring in like some elements of a system, but maybe not like a crazy, overly constrained one, like No Excuses High.
Well, I think there is an opportunity in there, particularly around assessment, because of the way it's structured. And I think there's a good lesson to be learned there. The idea of giving, so you can be very culturally responsive by the questions that the students are able to choose from, so that they could see themselves in the questions to be able to answer and write those essays, gives you far more flexibility and far more deeper understanding of what the student knows, and the student can express themselves in more culturally responsive ways, as opposed to what you can do in those flat bubble tests, which there's one way they ask them and one answer that's available. And you can't say, show your thinking, why did you choose D?
Right. Which on the IB math test, it even gives you, even on the math test in IB, at least back when I did it, it gives you a line that it says, well, how did you come to this conclusion, or why did you use this process? So it's very metacognitive.
Yeah. And so there is stuff to be learned from that, even though it's tighter. And to be fair, this school is maybe different than a lot of the IB schools that I'm familiar with, because this was a charter school. So that means it was a choice in, as opposed to a school that's a public school where students are simply assigned there. So we use the IB schools that we have here in Seattle, for example. You can choice into it, but it's a regular comprehensive high school that happens to have the IB program in it. So
right,
they're starting in a different place.
Which is exactly the way mine was when I went. It was a school within a school, essentially. I will say though, I think that there is, as you were talking about, like seeing yourself in the work, and IB, the thing that they do really well when it comes to like cultural diversity is that compared to like a normal Western, highly like traditional canonical set of like texts or histories, they usually are pretty broad, right? So like I read books from all over the world, from India, from Africa, in addition to like books from Europe and literature and history of, from all different places. However, I did not leave high school feeling more creative, like literally like I could create. And I didn't really have like a strong identity development. Like IB is still all about learning about the world out there. And it's not about your connection to it or your place in it, as far as my experiences. But you see it in this chapter as well, right? Like it's about learning about the world and not about yourself. That's, it's a big drawback.
But wasn't that one of the components about community service? Wasn't that the purpose of putting the community service component in there? Not only to get out there in the world, but to be able for you as an individual to reflect on who you are and your relationship to what's out there.
Yeah, I think if done correctly, that might elicit that sort of thing. But those things are so separate, right? Like community service and then the academics, right? And you always get the academics, get the grade, get the kind of the emphasis as far as like moving on to college or the next stage of your life. And it could be a more transformative thing. And I think if you look at Dewey High, right, High Tech High, you'll see that they do actually try to integrate community service into the projects that the students want to do. So, because I hate to say it, but in IB, and I think in many like regular comprehensive high schools, a community service requirement is like a checkbox, right? And it just doesn't become sort of more integrated than that into the students' learning.
So on a continuum, would you guys say, and you might have different answers, that IB is closer to No Excuses High than like Dewey High, or a big picture? I mean, if I went way over here with an individualized learning program, I mean, where does you see it? Is it just a different system? And is it still, I mean, Stephen, you jumped to it. Is it still about content mastery and not about individuality and creativity? Totally loaded that up. That was the most loaded question ever.
I mean, there's a few questions there. I definitely still think it's about mastery. And if you were to give that spectrum, it certainly feels like, I mean, if you go to an IB school and you go to a No Excuses school, they're going to be kids sitting in desks. Maybe in some IB schools, you'll have like discussions and stuff, but it's all academic. It's all oriented towards what we normally think of as like an academic stance or environment. So there's that. But I do think that the difference is in IB, the students at its best can have a much deeper understanding. The depth of the mastery is, I think, real. I wonder if you would, and maybe the authors would disagree, the No Excuses High, it still doesn't seem like the mastery is that deep, Yeah.
It's the classic, and I'll let you answer. I saw a study once where at a super deluxe East Coast high-end prep school where everybody's amazing, all students are above average. They gave the kids the science test and they all scored very well. And then they gave them the exact same science test 3 months later, out of the blue, with no warning, and they all failed it. They all failed the science test. It was the most pure, amazing study. Like these kids, not one of them got a passing grade. And they had all got A's on it before.
Right.
They never learned science. They memorized content until they didn't need it anymore. And I find that interesting. And I'm wondering if both of these systems kind of fall into that a little bit.
Well, they could, if implemented badly. But, I also think the structure, I think IB is a system, but there are also barriers to the system. There are financial barriers to the system that, worry me. So even if you had the value, there are tens of thousands of dollars that are going to go into getting you even in the door, and the length of time, 3 years to go, you have to go through all those hoops for 3 years to be even certified. Education doesn't have that kind, because they're ADD focused. Staying with something for 3 years with no real, benefit that they can see is going to be a hard sell.
But can I push back a little bit? It feels to me like at Real World Academy, if I'm a teacher next year and I decide I want to join Real World Academy, it will take me a year or two.
Yes, it will.
To get proficient
Yes.
in that way. And I will need training, and I will need coaching, and I will need to,
and all of those things are true. And as long as everyone is going in with both eyes open and being authentic about that and saying to people, this is where you have to keep people at arm's length and saying, we're doing it.
Yeah. Yeah.
We're moving along. Right.
Exactly.
And so that's one of those, I guess, warning flags that you want to have out there clearly, that when you're communicating to the community and everybody, is that they understand where you are.
Yeah, well, down before.
Well, I mean, and I don't know if this connects directly, but this is a quote from page 174. I mean, I think that there is something here that's relevant about the idea of like, well, so, okay, so I'll start with the quote, and it says, no matter how well specified and or compelling a set of instructional materials or design for schooling might be, the burden still ultimately falls on leaders, teachers, and students to leverage it in consistently powerful and context-sensitive ways.
And that's different than no excuses high, because they would say the system and the content are the equitable piece, and they keep the teachers from creative.
So what I think that between there seems to be two extremes here. One is, you just believe that by bringing in great teachers into a building and just saying, these are the most amazing people, great things are going to happen. That's one extreme. And then there's another extreme that says, schools are systems, there are machines, and all the teachers are cogs. And if you have a good enough machine, you can it doesn't matter who's there, right? So somewhere in between, I think, and maybe something that slants more towards the teacher, that slants more towards the student, because I think then, like, I'll just blow up my own analogy and say, does a school change when a teacher leaves, right? Like, how many teachers have to leave a school before it's not the same school? Mm-hmm. Right. And again, this goes to the points that that folks were making in the comments at the first two chapters. What if you start with the teachers and the students and their passions and who they are? And do they become parts of that?
Correct. But then if you don't have a system, it takes very few teachers leaving to break what you have.
Right.
System, a hardcore system, every teacher can leave and it still exists. So again, we're on this continuum, are you? I think the call for no system is a cult of personality. And when that personality changes, that personality, we've all seen that, the amazing leader leaves, it changes.
Yeah.
So how do you build something into the future, but also get the best of the teachers and the administrators and the students, right?
Right, because every year, hundreds of people are going to leave your school. Well,
that's the key. Students are key to it. Hundreds of your participants are leaving every year.
Exactly, yeah.
If they are just consumers of it, it doesn't matter.
Right.
And that's a good one to end on. That's awesome. I love when you guys put good stuff out there and I get to say it. All right. Well, thank you for joining us for another one. And man, there's all these, we can talk about them so much. Next week, we will be delivering chapters 5 and 6, and then the following week, 7 and 8. So good reading, and we'll look for your comments and we'll be responding back to them every week also. Everyone, thank you.